I'm with Max Porterfield, CEO of Visionary Copper and Gold. The symbol for Visionary is VCG on the TSX Venture. Max, how are you today?
I'm doing excellent. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. It's been a little bit since we've chatted. You were on my panel at MIF in May of 2025. A lot has happened since May of 2025. So I want to get everybody up to speed here. And you're drilling at Point Leamington. Well done.
Yeah, no, that's the most exciting part is that we are drilling. Really excited to be drilling. Obviously it takes a lot of work to get established and get the drills underway. And the targets that we're drilling have really big upside on the asset and therefore also on our shareholders as well, of course, and what we're on to there in Newfoundland. So excited to be testing those targets right now. So the drill's turning. Quite frankly, that's the most exciting part of this business.
It is, yeah. So I definitely want to talk about that. But before we get into it, let's talk about, VMS deposits here in 2026. We got some news on Monday morning that Foran mining is being acquired by a mid-tier gold producer. Seems a little bit out of the ordinary for a gold mining company to buy a VMS asset, but the valuation is very impressive, almost $3 billion. What does that, say to you?
Well, I mean, it says to me our time is here, and the valuation at 60 cents a pound of copper equivalent mineralization in the ground sets a really kind of a new benchmark for, I think, other deals that have come in the future at those type of valuations. That's a very large VMS asset that they've done a great job advancing. It was a construction phase. And in terms of the asset base, it is a polymetallic deposit, zinc copper deposit. And again, I think it shows the value of assets that are near-term producers in safe jurisdictions that are going to have exposure, in particular, to copper. And I think that's a new trend that's going to continue to advance, is that exposure that some of these mining companies want to get to copper, even if they're currently in gold. If you look at that valuation and kind of apply a similar metric to Rainbow and Pine Bay, and the mineralization that we've outlined there that's currently in our advanced exploration permitting stage, you look at roughly a $250 million valuation based upon our resources in the ground. Just a broad stroke on that, and that's also further underpinned by the recent JOGMET investment into the surrounding Flin Flon region on the JV that Hudbay had with Marubeni, where JOGMET has been invested on that JV $6 million commitment, 210%, and that's exploration ground that doesn't have any discoveries that have been announced or anything being outlined. And if you look at our portfolio in Pine Bay in Manitoba, it's very strategically located in proximity to 3 different mills. The one in Snow Lake that's currently in operation by Hudbay with the Lawler mine. The one, of course, nearby in Flin Flon that's just about 25-minute drive away. That's on care and maintenance right now. And then, of course, the El Dorado acquisition of Foran, and that's about 125 kilometers away by existing road. And then that in the news, you're getting a lot of talk about the Port of Churchill, that strategic location, the rail line, and that rail line starts there in Flin Flon and gives direct access to that port. So strategically, on a kind of macroeconomic level, or kind of macro level, I should say, it's uniquely placed. Ramp accessible in Manitoba. Just to touch on that before we jump further into Newfoundland stuff, as we advance permitting with an Environmental Act license, which would be the final permit necessary to go into production, Rainbow will be one of those few assets out there that's a near-term production potential, and particularly where it's located with all that infrastructure that surrounds it, of course the workforce as well. To go back to your question about VMS assets, to talk about another VMS asset that's nearby our exploration in Newfoundland, Firefly Metals also has got over $1 billion market cap today on a VMS deposit. The main deposit, when it was originally discovered, was 4 million tons in size, and now that one's grown into north of 50 million tons, about 2% copper equivalent. And they divested their non-core asset there recently. So I do think that they could be a takeout target in the future. no different than what you've seen with Eldorado's move on Foran for similar reasons. You know, they have advanced infrastructure there located by the port. So again, we're also ideally located with what we're doing at Point Leamington with already a significant scale and I think a real potential to grow into a significant tier 1 asset very quickly with what we're onto there.
Yeah, let's talk about Point Leamington and, you know, Newfoundland as a jurisdiction. This is actually one of the great, you know, VMS belts or camps in Canada. Tell us about the, you know, history there and also the history of Point Leamington.
Yeah, so there's significant history of production in the Buckens district is what they would call, you know, one area of Newfoundland. Where there's been a lot of past producers. And then if you go north, where I mentioned Firefly Metals, there's a historic producer at the Rambler mine. And now the Ming deposit is there and is looking to utilize that infrastructure because VMS deposits occur in clusters when you find them. And you're suddenly seeing that play out with Firefly's success to the north. Obviously, the historic production in Buckens, that was to the south there. And then when you look at Point Leamington is the only deposit that's been found so far in the area, very limited exploration. And we have a series of isolated airborne anomalies that would coincide in that kind of clustering effect on these horizons, which make up these VMS systems. So in terms of Point Leamington was originally discovered by Noranda in 1971, following up on an airborne survey that was flown in '67 by Phelps Dodge. And they held that property all the way up until 1997. They put 71 holes in that deposit, really focused on the zinc mineralization and a bit of copper there as well, which is what our focal point is the copper and the growth of that moving forward. And less on the gold, which it is a significant gold resource. It ultimately divested it in 1997 to Rubicon, who then did a short round of drilling and then turned around and optioned it to BHP in 1999. BHP held that property, but also that's again shows the significance and the potential size the property hosts for them to have optioned the property. And then the last round of exploration was in 2004, where they extended the deposit along strike to the south, and they really stopped from that point on. There was a modern airborne survey flown in 2007 that was never followed up. And then we acquired it actually from Newmarket. Newmarket had utilized it as their IPO transaction asset to immediately move to Australia. And then we acquired it from them prior to them being acquired by Kirkland Lake. So we've held that property and we bought it in tandem to Nash Creek and Superjack in New Brunswick at the bottom of the metal cycle. Again, this is at a time when gold is at $16.50 an ounce, copper is at $2 a pound, zinc 70 cents, and silver was around 10-15 bucks. So a lot's changed since that time. We updated the resource in 2021, and as we entered advanced permitting in Manitoba, we took it as an ideal opportunity to shift our focus to Newfoundland to use modern exploration approaches and tools to rapidly expand the Point Leamington deposit with this really targeted exploration program that we announced that we've commenced here last week.
So at Point Leamington, there is a resource, you know, as you said, and you updated it in 2021. So in all categories, we're talking about over 20 million tons, and the average grade is about 1.4% copper equivalent. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so it's got a robust polymetallic resource. In terms of the gold, it's about 500,000 ounces of gold, 8 million ounces of silver, 170 million pounds of copper, and 700 million pounds of zinc. And that's in the pit constrained portion of that resource base. What exists on the property outside of that known resource is that it's only been drilled down to the 350 meter level. If you look at these VMS deposits, like the Ming deposit, like our Rainbow deposit in Manitoba, and like many other VMS deposits, is they can have a kind of a shorter strike to other deposit styles, but then they can plunge at depth, significant depths. In Manitoba, for example, you know, Rainbow starts at 90 meters underground. It's been drilled out to 900 meters vertical depth and remains open at depth. The 777 mine went down to 1.6 kilometers. as well. That was a past producer right in Flin Flon. If you look at the Ming deposit nearby, that starts at 250 meters underground, and they've drilled that down to, below 2 kilometers at this point, and has a strike of 200 meters. So Point Leamington has already had a strike of 500 plus meters in the current resource base. It's only been drilled down to the 350 meter level, and it remains open at depth. In addition to that, if you look at these deposits, it's very, very rare that they have these big strike extents like the Flin Flon mine, like Kid Creek, where you have strikes over a kilometer. And so that's what we'll be testing in this current exploration campaign, is that the most recent drilling done in 2004 that extended the resource along strike to the south. There was borehole EM data that vectored to more conductive mineralization to the south of that, as well as it's supported by this airborne data that was flown subsequent to that drilling that has an airborne anomaly that's 350 meters long. And if you look at, again, the strike of Ming, for example, is just north of 200 meters. 777 was similar, just north of 225 meters. Point Leamington is in, very rare kind of shape in terms of the potential there for it extended to over a kilometer strike extent, where you can have multiple plunging chutes that extend at depth there. In addition to that, what we'll be targeting is these VMS systems have a stacking of lenses that you'll see in them. In the way this was drilled out, and this is a lot of success that you saw at Firefly's main deposit, is they were drilling it out geologically the opposite direction that you'd ideally like to. That's just how it's oriented underground. And so they weren't drilling the holes deeper to test the potential for a lower footwall horizon, is what you call it, or a stacking of mineralizations below it. And so there's a couple of holes that were drilled below Point Leamington that hit wide intervals of copper mineralization. We're talking 35, 45 meters, 0.5% copper. That exists outside the resource, that has the potential to robustly grow the resource near surface as we advance as in a potential open pit operation, as you noted earlier about it being a pit constrained and out of pit resource as well.
So let's talk about the drill program that's now underway. So I'm looking at the plan map with the airborne showing this big anomaly to the south of the core deposit area. Tell us about the objective of hole 1 of the drill program, and then where do you go next with the drill rig?
Yeah, so PL 111 is the first hole of the drilling campaign. As you noted, it's going to be testing that airborne anomaly. As I mentioned earlier, that airborne anomaly is actually supported by borehole EM data as well. That's been modeled, that coincides with the airborne data. So it's great to have geophysically multiple data sets that you're seeing this in. Importantly, the in-hole off-hole anomaly is associated with 8 meters of massive sulfides or of resources that hit both precious metals and base metal mineralization that exists in the resource. PL 72 was a historic hole that hit that 8 meters of mineralization that we mentioned in the news that we announced there. So that's the first hole of the campaign. That obviously is going to be targeting and have the expectation of hitting massive sulfides. We're testing it very close to surface, but the mineralization typically gets better as you go at depth. You see that to the north at Point Leamington. So we're getting first holes to test that near surface to see what we intersect to that in. And then where we're going to be moving the rig after that is immediately into going to be testing an area of the Point Leamington deposit. We'll be going through the Point Leamington deposit where we believe it was potentially undersampled. Again, it was nearby the 4th and 9th hole of the campaign. And this is at a time when they were hand splitting the core back in 1973. And we're going to be pushing that hole deeper into the footwall, deeper than anybody's drilled into the footwall, because holes in that area, there was hole 4 of the campaign I just mentioned, that hit 45 meters, about 0.5% copper that sits outside of the resource, that's near surface. And that shows, again, the potential that sits deeper in the footwall or just adjacent to the known resource at Point Leamington. So that's the second hole of the campaign that we're moving on to, is to immediately, again, there's I think a potential undersampling of that area, and then testing that lower footwall as the first hole to that. And then subsequent in the next step is we're going to be moving that drill rig to test a potential area of an area that was untested near surface for some copper mineralization that would be currently modeled in that pit-constrained resources waste that we think potentially is an area that was just not drilled off that would be included in the existing pit-constrained resources. We'd update that moving forward. So that's kind of the first 3 holes of the campaign. And then immediately as we begin that, as we're looking to mobilize a borehole EM crew for borehole electromagnetic surveys, as we utilize that as a key tool to aid in vectoring to wider intervals or and/or higher grade of mineralization based upon that kind of data it provides, right? So it looks for more conductive sources of mineralization off hole. Conductivity will be a determinant of conductivity thickness and how thick that mineralization is, and again, how conductive that mineralization appears to be from the probe.
So how many holes are planned at this point, and how many meters in total?
So there's 7 holes that were outlined out of the first phase, which is going to be testing these key areas of that area. Within that, there is meterage budgeted in the 3,000 to extend some of those holes depending on what we're seeing in that rock. So when we're drilling these things and we're hitting, we always want to make sure that you never shut the hole down too short. And when we're drilling that from a borehole EM perspective, you want to be 100 meters past your last massive sulfide intersection. So obviously we have plans to hit massive sulfides in this, and with that we've got the budget meters to be able to extend that hole, and then giving timing, and when we get the borehole EM data out there, have the capacity to immediately follow up with a few holes in this phase 1 campaign.
So investors always want to know when they're going to hear about the results and get updates on the drill program. How do you intend to update the market?
Yeah, so we're pushing very, very hard on getting the first set of holes. The first 3 holes is ideal, the focus here, because the first 3 holes will be the holes that will be the initial hole into the furthest along strike to the south, that airborne EM anomaly that you mentioned. The second would be into the lower footwall, and then the third would be the other target area, which is that copper stringer mineralization that be untested. So we get the 3 holes in those 3 key target areas out first by March, early March would be the goal, and then continue to relay that information to the market thereafter. So again, that's kind of the anticipation that we're looking in, is getting that out, hopefully with the borehole data as well to support that, and the next step as the program progresses.
And then I guess final question, Max, what are the other key goals of 2026 in terms of met work or other work across the broader property package there?
Yeah, so in terms of the focus for 2026, phase 1 is underway. Phase 1 is going to really dictate and outline the phase 2 campaign, which, believe strongly be planning a step out campaign, delineating new resources. As we'd be delineating a potential lower footwall, for example, we'd also be wanting to upgrade the current Point Leamington resource. In addition to that, as part of that, we'd be looking to do met work on a 2-phase program that will outline the flow sheet necessary as you look to advance Point Leamington. And then as we enter 2027, we'd be in a potential to, again, still aggressively be drilling that near surface stuff out, or mineralization out, testing the deposit at depth, and then bringing some regional targets into the fold as well, as we're eyeing a potential upgrading of the current resource based upon all that work. And then broader outside of Newfoundland, we're really dead set on getting an advanced exploration permit. That advanced exploration permit is a key permit to be able to advance the development of Pine Bay and Rainbow. That allows you to ramp down to the deposit, take a bulk sample, begin met work there, as well as underground drilling. And then once you have the AEP in place, and then the second key long-term permit we're looking to establish this year, submit for, is the Environmental Act license. And the submission of that would be late summertime with the work necessary to facilitate the submission of that. And the Environmental Act license is your final permit you'll need to have full-scale production at Pine Bay. And then, of course, looking to continue to work up the exploration targets that we've identified there, with a potential summer field campaign there that we're evaluating right at this time. And then on the Sowie front, with the gold side, we will look to submit permits for the historic high-grade Gurney gold mine. That sits about a 30-minute drive from Pine Bay, and about half hours from, obviously the Flin Flon area as well. So that was something on a permitting front for Manitoba we're looking to achieve. But again, the drills are turning in Newfoundland. I'm very, very pumped about what's to come there, and really the potential and execute on that potential, obviously, to have that grow into a tier 1 asset very, very quickly with the drill bit, no differently than the success we had in growing the Rainbow resource and advancing it to where it is today. We feel that potential can happen more quickly because of how close to surface these target areas are here in Newfoundland.
Very good, Max. Thanks for the update. Super excited to see the rest of the drill program there at Point Leamington and all the results as they come out. And the Visionary Copper and Gold share structure is super clean. It's one of the tightest share structures of any juniors that I own. And the stage is set for a big 2026. Thank you.
Thanks so much again for having me.